All right, good afternoon, good day, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you to Jim and the GEM program and the JP Morgan Commodities Center, a joint program. So hearing that I'm the first speaker, I told Jim I think they can only go up from here. So we'll just set that bar nice and low. So thank you all for being here and taking lunchtime out of your day to talk about energy. As you heard from my background, my career has all been around the intersection of energy, the environment, and business and technology in one form or another, whether it's been environmental consulting and air pollution modeling, or risk assessments, or helping clean tech entrepreneurs get their businesses started, or working at IHS with the data side of things, and now working at Spira, where we're helping energy companies, power companies, and other manufacturers keep their people safe, keep the environment safe, keep their operations productive. So we've got some software tools and solutions to do that. But at heart, I'm still a nerd, a little bit of a policy wonk, so I'll try to not inflict all of that on you during this presentation, but we can definitely go there as you like. So the presentation today is Resource Rich Colorado. It's put together by the Metro Denver Economic Development Corporation and the Colorado Energy Coalition. I've been privileged and honored to chair that committee for the past 2 years. It is most definitely a team effort. So working on doing some slides here. There we go. Got it. So most definitely a team effort. I'm seeing the slides change on the back one. I'm not seeing them change up here. So while we get that going, so I think the webinars got it. I can talk to these and tap dance a little bit here. So this is most definitely a team effort. It's an annual compendium of data about the energy industry, everything from fossil fuels, natural gas, coal, oil. We talk about clean tech. We talk about other renewables. We talk about energy storage. We talk a little bit about policies and programs. We talk about employment and just how important the energy industry is specifically to Colorado. And we also try to take a look of what does that mean for our state? What does that mean for our position globally? So you'll see some data that's fairly state-specific, comparing us state to state, and you'll see some data talking about the global position. So this is very data intense, lots of charts and graphs. So bear with me. As there's questions, comments along the way, throw a hand up and we'll chat about them. And if there's questions online, type those into the chat box and we'll get those answered as we go along. So like I said, this is a team effort. Jim was a great addition to the team this year and really helped bring perspective. So you can see that there's folks from kind of across the energy spectrum, whether it's power, oil and gas, utilities, some government folks involved, and some renewables and clean tech folks. So we try to get a balanced perspective. This is one of my favorite projects all throughout the year, so I enjoy it. So hopefully you will as well. So with that, let's go ahead and dive in. We've got our token infographic here, basically to say that Colorado does have a balanced energy economy. We do have a strong resource base in oil and natural gas and coal. We've also got tremendous resources in the renewable space, whether it's solar or wind. And we've got a lot of technology companies here as well. We've got NREL as one of the national lab amongst the 30 other federally funded national labs here. So the technology base, the brain power is actually a huge driver for our energy industry. It's a very large portion of our economy. It's not the only mover in our economy for folks that have survived some of the up and downs of previous decades, but it still is a primary mover in the state's economy. So one of the reasons we developed this report was to explain this to a variety of audiences, whether it's the energy industry or policymakers, and more specifically policymakers, to say, listen, tread carefully when you're considering energy policy because this is an important part. So here's some data, some facts at your fingertips so that you can go in armed with some data and some perspective. So that's a lot of the context for the data that presented here today. All right, so the way this is organized, we're going to go a couple of slides about each section. I'll talk to the charts and graphs. Keep in mind that there's probably 5 to 10 more charts and graphs in the full report that are not presented here. So again, we can dive in as much as you want. So oil prices over time. I think this is a story it's familiar to most folks in this room. We are still operating in a low price environment. And the Colorado crude just a little bit below some of the benchmark crude oil prices. That just reflects a little bit of transportation cost for us to get our production out to market. The other caveat I'll throw in here is that all these data sources are publicly available data, so there's nothing proprietary here. We're trying to take a more year-over-year, decade-over-decade type of view as opposed to moment-to-moment, week-to-week. And we don't really try to put any predictions or forecasting into this per se. I'll speculate a little bit about that, but know that that's just one man's opinion, not necessarily the conclusion of the report. Crude oil production by state. So Colorado ranks in the top 10 here. Texas most definitely dominates, with North Dakota coming in at second. We can see that there's ebbs and flows. Each of these charts has the compound annual growth rate on there. So Colorado has been going pretty steadily, 23% compound annual growth rate for 5 years there. And you can see that given the low price environment, so the last bar, things have kind of tapered back a little bit as producers just kind of react to the low price and temper that growth. Talking a little bit about drilling efficiency, and we used to track rig count as the proxy for efficiency, but the Energy Information Administration came up with this drilling productivity report. Just given the technology advances in the drilling industry for oil and natural gas, as a much better proxy to say where's the action, where are we getting the most production. So these are some of the major plays that are operating here in the U.S. And so one takeaway here is you can see that there's a major inflection point around 2011, 2012, and that's the fracking boom beginning. So that's when technology is deployed to really allow growth and great increase in productivity across all of these different plays. So you can see the leader here is the Eagle Ford in the blue line. Colorado's own Niobrara is now on pace for over 1,000 barrels per day per rig. So that's just an impressive growth. If you look at in 2010, less than 200 barrels per rig. Now you've got many of these plays operating up near 1,000. So huge productivity growth in the oil production sector. Taking the global view, this data, so the U.S. had just overtaken Saudi Arabia as the largest oil producer. So lots of geopolitical implications of this production boom, shifting the power, shifting some of the alliances and things. I will not get onto my soapbox about geopolitics. That's out of my depth, but I'll just put it out there that this obviously has a lot to do with who's dependent on whom for various resources. And it looks like that is probably going to continue going forward as the U.S. continues to draw down our oil resource base. So moving on to the natural gas, you're going to see a lot of the same types of charts. So natural gas prices, once again, we're in a low price environment, and for the foreseeable future, that all predictions and forecasts I've seen have shown a pretty long-term steady low price, just given the amount of resource we have in the ground, again, driven by the hydraulic fracturing technology and other productivity improvements to allow us to efficiently get to much more resource just here in the United States. Production by state, again, Colorado's kind of middle of the top 10 at number 6. Texas, again, leading the way. The big story over these 5 years is you get states on here that would have never even registered as gas producing states 5 years ago that are now up there. So Pennsylvania having the Marcellus, 65% compound annual growth rate over 5 years. That's they would have barely registered 5 years ago, and now they're number 2. Ohio, my home state, making it into the top 10 there. So go Bucks. Taking the global view, again, the United States is the global leader. So the significance here is pretty huge. That we can talk about this a little bit more about. We used to be a major natural gas importer, and now looking at switching that infrastructure around to being a natural gas exporter. What's that going to do for global markets? Lots of interesting questions and debate to be had. Billions of dollars of capital being deployed because of this fact that the U.S. has such a steady base of domestic natural gas. So again, just a very, very interesting story there about what that might do to other markets. Talking about coal. So state by state here, Colorado is ranking 11th. So here the compound annual growth rates tend to be negative. I think that's just not going to be a surprise to anyone in this room. Coal continues to decline. Wyoming, West Virginia, Kentucky, Illinois. So the major coal producing areas are continuing. They're also seeing a decline in their production. I think this chart really tells the story of why and kind of where we're going. It will probably be very, very, very difficult to build a new coal-fired power plant in the United States anytime in the future. What we're looking at here is capacity and installation. So the black bars on the top are the new capacity added, and the red bars towards the bottom are capacity that's been retired. So this is looking at across the entire coal fleet. You can see that there's a very strong decline. Kind of the net outtake of capacity has ramped up the past 5 to 7 years here, and is likely to continue. Colorado specifically, over the past 5 to 7 years, has retired about 1 gigawatt. That was Xcel's Clean Air, Clean Jobs plan. So they switched many of their generating stations from coal to natural gas, and they actually just straight retired several others and have ramped up renewables to build that capacity and energy efficiency programs. And that similar type of shift from coal to natural gas is seen kind of across the country. And then even more recent news, Xcel has put forward a proposal to retire 2 more coal-fired units from down in Pueblo. So just continuing that shift away from coal as a fuel, as other fuels have been shown to be cleaner, just easier to operate, more flexible. So we'll see a little bit more about this in the renewable section when we talk about the price of wind and solar and how that's dramatically dropped. So I've got a chart for you in a few more slides on that. Global coal production. So the U.S. is still number 2. China's number 1. And tremendous reserves of coal in China and tremendous dependence in their energy sector on coal. So they make up, looking at the pie chart here, they make up almost half of global coal production. Shifting to clean tech. As promised, here's the price of wind. So this is looking at the levelized, unsubsidized cost of wind, just based on a technology basis over the past 5 years. So declined more than 50%. And this is the story here for both wind and solar, that it now becomes cost competitive to other fossil fuels to generate power. It is intermittent, but utilities and generators are getting better and better at figuring out how to integrate wind into their systems and keep prices stable and relatively low for consumers. And literally keep the lights on despite the intermittent nature of wind. Just again, talking locally, Xcel has a program where they work with some of our national labs to develop an algorithm that gives them a much tighter time band to predict the weather, to be able to ramp up and ramp down their wind production or their natural gas-fired power plants to keep the load stable. So that's allowed them to make the best use of their investment and continue to add more wind to the grid. So Xcel has one of the windiest grids of any major utility in the United States. So a little point of pride for the Colorado folks here. Wind capacity by state. So Colorado is 10th in overall capacity. Texas, California, Iowa leading the way with wind capacity. The story in Texas is really all about price. Like, how can you get me my power for nice and cheap and steady? And they've got good wind resource there. So, you know, not always a state that you would think of really pushing renewable energy, but very much sensitive to price. And you can see that they've continued to add quite a bit, even in recent years. Wind generation just as a percent of total, and I like this view, again, to be able to see Colorado here ranking in the top 10, about 17% of our energy generated in the past year came from wind, which again, not only is that a cheap way to generate power just from the resource itself, but it also has a lot to do with being able to integrate that into the overall system. So I think you'll continue to see these numbers go up and up as more wind is deployed and utilities get better at figuring out how to make the most of that investment. All right, price of solar, even more dramatic decline over the past 5 years, more than almost 75% for crystalline silicon. So same story, makes it much more attractive for utilities to switch, for communities to switch when the price of solar is now cost competitive. California, far and away the leader here. So a lot of this is the mega utility scale generating power plants. You can also see some of the effect in this chart of state by state subsidies and incentives. So you get states like New Jersey, not particularly known as a Sun Belt type of a state, but with a very strong incentive and push at the state level to deploy solar. So that's why you see them up there, for example. And then Colorado here is 9th overall. Again, net generation is a percent of total. California, with all of their capacity, leads the way. Nevada and Arizona, again, with utility scale solar, continuing to ramp up and integrate those more effectively into the grid. And Colorado squeaks into the top 10 here with our solar net generation. One thing that we haven't looked at in detail yet, because we haven't been able to get a really nice, trusted, publicly available data source, is what does community scale solar mean and what is rooftop solar? A lot of this is pretty focused on the utility scale. So I think that's going to be a story to track over the next couple of years, is what are utilities doing to either incentivize or de-incentivize community solar and rooftop solar? How do those costs get split? You know, you still may be using the wires of the transmission grid, even though you're generating energy on top of your own house. I've gotten bids from solar installers at my own house, so this is a very real thing for me. I'm trying to figure out what do I do for my utility costs. Do I wait another couple of years for that cost curve to come down even more, or is it leveling off? What's Xcel going to be able to do to either penalize me or incentivize me to go solar? So very much in play. So this is now looking at the global cumulative installed capacity. And this one popped out a year or two ago and really surprised me at how big China is in renewables. So not only are they the largest consumer of coal, but they are pretty significantly ahead in installation of renewables. So just that's got to be another part of the story here, is that they're just a huge energy consumer across the board, and they do have the largest cumulative installed base of renewables.
What's the percentage of the total global capacity?
So this is just straight gigawatts installed. Okay. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. So and then I mean, on almost all of these countries, you see very significant compound annual growth rates, and again, that's likely to continue in the future. I wanted to talk a little bit in this year's report about energy storage, because that's a big question. As there's more renewables integrated to the grid, how do we store that energy? What are things like battery storage doing? In the United States, at least, the bar chart on the left-hand side here says, look, it's almost all pumped hydro storage. So that's pump water uphill at night when electricity is cheap, and flow it through the generator during the day when you want to generate your power. So that's almost everything we have. You can barely see there's some colored bars just kind of right at the cap there, a little sliver. The chart on the right breaks that out. So on the left, we're talking 23 gigawatts. On the right, we're talking hundreds of megawatts. So notice the order of magnitude shift here in scale. Battery storage is the highest growing, fastest growing area here, the kind of orange bars in the middle. And I think, again, that's going to continue with companies continuing to invest in battery technology. We didn't put the chart in there, but the battery cost curve is following wind, following solar, following more or less any kind of materials technology follows a similar type of curve. So battery is going to continue to grow, is the likely story for energy storage. So again, stay tuned here, because this will be something to watch over the next 3 to 5 years, how it goes. Question? So the question is, what's compressed air? What comprises the compressed air storage segment? Off the top of my head, I'm not sure exactly where those are coming from specifically for the plants, but I can dig into the data and kind of figure out where they are. Still in the clean tech section here, another measure we look at is cumulative LEED certified square footage. So this is on a per capita basis. Colorado is number 3. So sustainable building technologies, lower energy footprint. We've got quite a bit here per capita. So that's just a nice measure of sustainability in the built environment. This was a new view that we were able to get this year, which I personally really like, which is the net electricity savings from energy efficiency programs. So how much is your utility pushing megawatts, and what are we getting out of that? So what are we actually saving? What are the watts we don't have to generate from whatever source? So Colorado, a little bit less than 1% of our electricity saved by these energy efficiency programs. Some of the big movers there, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, taking up over 2.5% of their projected electricity demand was actually saved by these energy efficiency programs. So I think that's an interesting view to kind of get in here and get something that's at least a nice piece of data, or a nice set of data for energy efficiency.
What's driving that, Brian? Is it the primary sources?
I think this is looking more at things like demand side generation, like one of the programs about like shifting load, and like the air conditioner program. I forget exactly what Xcel brands it as, but if you get a little smart box on the side of your air conditioner, they can say during the day, all right, we're gonna allow you to turn this thing off for 4 hours. They give us as a consumer a little kickback. It's like, all right, we'll give you whatever cents or dollars on that if you let us manage that, and we're gonna that lets us keep a peaker plant offline. So instead of having to fire up another peaker plant, we can just manage that load, and that saves us a sliver of this 1%. So, and it's programs like that. There's a lot. This would include anything like on the industrial and commercial sector, have several programs for energy efficiency as well. And I think even like appliance switching, like appliance rebates, like buy back your old 20-year-old inefficient appliance and do that many, many times over across your install base. That means you don't have to go deploy capital to build a new power plant. You can just, do some marketing and keeps folks up on.
Do these northeastern states like Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and Vermont have very aggressive programs, state programs?
Yeah. So that's exactly what this data shows, is that they're able to. I don't know the specific details of what they've done, but that's the punchline here. Mm-hmm. So another look in the clean tech section is just alternative fuel vehicles per capita. So right now these are very tiny numbers as a percentage of the overall fleet, whether it's compressed natural gas or electricals or plug-in hybrids. They're small numbers. California, as one might expect, has the largest count per capita. Just this year, with all the announcements of companies that are launching electric vehicles and making a push towards that, there's a lot of headlines that will move this slowly. I think this, monitor this one over the course of decades, probably not years in the fleet turnover, but it's going to be a big deal. Just for one reason why that's important to Colorado is just our local air quality and how people get from point A to point B. Mobile source emissions are a large contributor to our air quality issues and will continue to be so. So for the folks here in the metro area, the more we can get alternative fuel vehicles, the more that's going to help our air quality issues. We've got a nice clear day finally to see the mountains here, but it's been pretty ugly the past couple of weeks given the wildfires and things. But so this will be a good story to watch over the coming years. One more view around kind of clean tech and mobility. This looks at metro areas and how people get to where they need to go. You can see that the major metros of New York, San Francisco, Chicago have pretty substantial public transit infrastructure. So that yellow bar is a major portion of their commuting. So Denver's in the top 10 here in terms of getting about 20% of our trips as outside of that dreaded drive alone zone. So I did ride my bike here today. So I did my part to ride the bike, and look forward to doing that for at least another month or two. And hopefully the weather won't turn too nasty. But again, it'll be interesting to see how this develops around as FasTracks gets fully deployed and as our population continues to grow. Are we going to get more solo drivers? Are we going to get more carpools? Are we going to get more transit? We shall see. All right, talking about the power sector. So this is now taking a decades-long view, the stacked bar graph of the where are we getting our electricity. So a couple of things to notice on this one. Oil, this gray section in the middle, has basically completely phased out. There are a token number of generators on remote areas that still operate off of diesel or kerosene in Hawaii or other remote areas. So effectively gone. Coal, major decrease to where it was holding steady for decades at roughly half of the energy or power produced came from coal, is now ticking around 30%. What's driving that out is so partly is the nuclear fleet came online in the late 60s. Also the renewables and natural gas have pushed to make up the share, and so you can see pretty steep increase in natural gas fired power generation. Last one I'll comment on is hydro. So in the 20s, 30s, 40s, we built the major infrastructure projects, the major dams that are the hydro producers. So that this has just been pinched down. There's been really no net new major additions of hydro over the years, but you can just see as a percentage, it's kind of gotten squeezed down over time. And then of course the green bar on top with the renewables making a stronger play for our market share. Yeah.
Is that the shrinking hydro, is that more an illustration of just no added generation as the overall demand rises?
Yeah. So the question is, what's going on with hydro? Is that actually shrinking, or is that just the pie is getting bigger? And it's the latter. The pie is getting bigger. So we've got more or less the same, generating nameplate capacity of hydro that we had in 1950 as we do today, plus or minus a rounding error. And it's just that we produce a lot more power currently than we did back then. So now trying to look at a little bit of the economics of power generation. So this is the levelized cost of electric generation plants. This is as close as we can get to an apples to apples comparison of what would it take to generate power from any of these different sources. So we're looking at each of these, for each of these technologies, what is the capital cost, fixed O&M, variable O&M, which includes your fuel, and then any transmission investment to bring that power to market, and what might it cost. So advanced natural gas and geothermal are the cheapest. Right in the mix, you see wind, hydro, and solar PV as the next. Far out to the right here is advanced coal, and solar thermal kind of stretching the chart out there on the right. So this is not the only thing that a utility would consider in choosing to deploy a technology, but cost is obviously a large driver. They need to consider the balance of the grid and other things. What we've noticed over 5, 6, 7 years of preparing this report is how this graph has changed and shuffled. So 5 years ago, wind and solar were all out here in these big tall bars that were almost out of the realm of economic feasibility. Coal was roughly competitive. Advanced natural gas, those bars were taller because they were more expensive. So the technology and deployment of more natural gas fired power plants and more wind and solar has pushed those into the cheaper side of the equation here in the levelized cost. So that's been interesting to watch. Question.
What are the subsidies adding to solar? Just in sort of 10%.
Yeah. So the question is, what are the subsidies adding to wind and solar in terms of percentage? I don't have a good number off the top of my head.
These are unsubsidized.
So so the data on the chart here is unsubsidized cost. I'm not sure what the subsidies are, whether it's 10%, 50%, 80%, but it is making a difference. I'm sure. Another question?
Over time, we've seen wind and solar come down and kind of get closer to natural gas. Is there synchronicity there with how well we're integrating those two forms of generation? Does that add to the cost of the?
Yeah. So the question is, as we're seeing wind and solar become cheaper and more, achieve more cost parity with natural gas, is part of that due to the integration efforts? And I think the answer is yes. And part of it is going to be, I think it would show up in this chart in partly the transmission investment a little bit, as there's new investments in the grid. And then it would be in the variable O&M or fixed O&M. So like, Excel's program to monitor and forecast wind and solar going on, that's not free. They have engineers and techs working on that. They've got some servers, I would suspect. They would lump that into those costs. But I think, again, those are the kind of things that would make it work and make it viable. Was another, yep, Rich. Okay. Okay. Got it. So I'm just going to repeat those for the folks on the webinar. So it was roughly, so can you say it one more time on? So we got $23 per megawatt hour for wind, which is about maybe 30–40% of that bar. So a major chunk of the cost. And then, yeah. So investment tax credit on solar is 30%. So again, that's just 30% off the total installed cost. So it's straight off the top. So those are numbers that I think if you were a utility looking to invest, they would make you sharpen your pencil and look again and try and take advantage of that. Definitely makes it a lot more attractive. Looking at electricity prices, this is the stuff that kind of hits each of our pocketbooks. And if you're a business owner in commercial or in industry, you know this is a big deal. You're going to be making decisions on this. The story for the next three graphs here is Colorado's basically kind of right in the middle, sort of the Goldilocks zone of not too high, not too low on the national spectrum, and also with pretty steady electricity rates. I think that's probably even more important than where we rank. You know, in terms of cost, it's that they've held pretty steady for consumers, for households, commercial or industrial consumers. I'm just going to kind of fast forward. That was the punchline for all three of these charts. So we're going to talk a little bit about emissions and carbon footprint here. I think when you're talking about energy and the shift between, or the balance between fossil and renewables, this is a big one. So this is looking over a couple of decades of the global CO2 emissions per capita. So the United States is the red line up here on the top. Our emissions per capita have leveled off and steadily declined. So part of that is probably attributable to the recession in the mid 2000s, late 2000s. But even as the economy has picked back up in recent years, that line has again held steady and not ticked back up, which I think is a positive thing. Talking about our just overall carbon footprint and just the efficiency of our economy. So Saudi Arabia has the highest emissions per capita footprint of any of the countries listed here. So China is this purple line down towards the bottom. So they've definitely increased over the years, but have kind of leveled off. So on a per capita basis, their emissions are still relatively low, but keep that in context of there's a lot of people there. On an absolute basis. In terms of metric tons, China is the largest emitter, followed closely by the United States. Looking at compound annual growth rates here tells a little bit more of the story. So whereas the U.S. has kind of come over a peak here in the past 5 years and basically held steady on a 5-year basis, China continues to grow at more than 5% per year in their total carbon emissions. Looking at a state-by-state basis, Colorado is 25th on the state per capita emissions. This data does get a little bit skewed by some low population, high energy intensity states like Wyoming, North Dakota, Louisiana, a lot of industry there. Our carbon footprint's relatively low. We've got we do have some heavy industry here for sure, but lots of lawyers and doctors and engineers that work computers rather than heavy machinery and things like that. So this is looking at a per GDP, so state emissions per GDP. Again, just a slight twist on it. The takeaway is about the same. Colorado kind of ranks in the middle there. On this one, I like to point out that all the compound annual growth rates are declining. So that means we're getting more GDP per metric ton of carbon that we're emitting. So that's a nice efficiency measure. So even though the absolute numbers may be ebbing and flowing a little bit, this is an efficiency story. So we're getting more from less. Policies and programs, again, I paired this back. The one thing I'll just touch on is the state gas tax. This is a third rail issue, can get really dicey really quickly. But again, considering the audience for this report originally was state and local policymakers, so just kind of throw a fact out there that here's the state gasoline tax. It's lower than the national average, and it hasn't been touched since 1991. So where does that money go? It funds lots of different programs, from transportation infrastructure to other infrastructure investments. But again, we're trending below the line for the state gas tax. Last section here before we open up to questions. As I said from the beginning, that the energy economy is a big deal for Colorado. It is a big deal for the United States. It is a big deal globally, right? Everybody here knows that. That's not a particularly controversial statement. What does it look like here in Colorado? We've seen a little bit of a dip in the fossil fuel employment. Again, tracking price declines as companies pare back a little bit just to survive in the lower price environment. On the clean tech side, just it's continued growth nationally and continued growth here in Colorado. We've got a nice sector of clean tech workers, clean tech knowledge base across all things wind, solar, batteries, and other technologies that would fall in the clean tech bucket. These are high-paying jobs, well above the national and state average in both fossil fuel and clean tech. So in the blue bars there in fossil fuels, the red bars in clean tech, substantially above the average for the industry. Economic impact that is roughly 15 billion. Hundreds of thousands of workers, direct and indirect. So this is a nice, the energy industry is nice in that you don't just get the direct workers, you do get a nice multiplier effect of indirect workers, induced jobs. And somebody that's more of an economics person can really explain what all those mean. But it's a lot of employment here in the state. So it does drive our economy a fair amount. But it's not the only thing driving our economy. Where in past decades, the energy cluster would have been a much higher bar and higher percentage of what the state's economy was. So kind of living and dying on the resource booms and busts. It still does take a major hit, up and down, but it's not gonna have as outsized effect as it would have had in previous years. I think the region has done a nice job to diversify into healthcare, business services, financial services, aerospace, and on down the list. So we do have a balanced economy broadly, and even within the energy industry, it has broadened significantly. Besides being just strictly in oil and gas and coal play, now the clean tech sector is there as well. So those the energy diversity in and of itself has increased. So with that, we're back to our infographic, and I will wrap it up. So thank you for the questions along the way. I think we've got plenty of time for some more questions and discussion here. And with that, I will open it up. Yes?
I'd like to ask a little bit of a question.
Fire away.
So what did you use to create these
Sure. So the question is, how? Yeah, absolutely. So the question is, how do we create all these graphs and charts? It's almost all driven off of Excel. So that's what we kind of standardize on because it's readily available. And major credit to David Hansen from Development Research Partners. So he's an economist, and it's his fault they look so nice. So a lot of what we did in the committee work was, Jim and myself and the other committee members would kind of get the data. So we would haggle and horse trade and try to interpret what was going on for a lot of the things like the subtitles and what should we really show? How do we get the compound annual growth rates? Like what charts are in, what charts are out? But David was really the one that drove that. And yeah, so Excel is one of those tools where most of us just sort of scratch the 1% surface of it, but it's really quite powerful in visualizing information. Yeah.
Tell people how they can download a copy.
Absolutely. So you can find a copy on the Metro Denver EDC website. We'll make sure that link gets circulated for the full report. Again, this is probably roughly half of what's in there. So plenty of light reading for all of you. And they make great stocking stuffers, just great, nice reports. So, and I'll also put out there, as you have any questions about kind of what's in here, feel free to use these. They're all publicly available information. They're all cited. All of the charts have the sources down here at the bottom. Again, this was the 2016 edition, so we updated everything as of December of last year, and kind of we do an annual refresh. Yeah, and I'm happy to talk about any of this stuff and go into the weeds on it. But yeah, it's nice that I've seen several of these slides reused at conferences and talks, and several folks have asked for them. So I think that's a nice way to say, okay, we're doing something that's at least mildly useful.
Question on your first slide when you break out by sector, by blocking. I was just curious, I work for a blocking company. Why efficiency was going up and it kind of dipped back down, whereas everything was sort of ramped up? Was that utilization or?
It could have been several things. I'm not sure exactly the answer. So speculating, it could have been things like takeaway capacity or lack thereof. It could have been just the specific geology of what was going on in the Bakken of hey, we've got something we figured out it's taking off, but as we get deeper into it and try to deploy that, we realize that other spots aren't quite as sweet, and trying to figure those out. It could have been land rights and permitting rights. It could have been company restructurings of some of the majors up there that are operating. Any and all of those things may have driven that dip. Yep. Any questions from the online group? Okay. Other questions in the room? Okay. All right. Thanks everybody.